What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to go back to the well and go over a wonderfully awful video from the Young Turks.
An FBI report from August has recently been discovered identifying Black identity extremists as a terrorist threat.
Oh my god, it's 8 seconds into the video and she's already doing air quotes. You know what? I cannot do this alone. So joining me to get through this cringe is my friend at Pissed Off Popsicle TV.
Hi there, Internet. My name's Ezra with the Pissed Off Popsicle TV, or Pop TV on YouTube. My buddy Sean asked me if I wanted to do a collab with him. I said, yeah, I'm totally down. But, oh my god.
FBI assesses it is very likely Black identity extremist, or BIE, perceptions of police brutality.
Why is she talking like that?
Perceptions of police brutality against African Americans spurred an increase in premeditated, retaliatory, lethal violence against law enforcement and will very likely serve as justification for such violence. The FBI assess it is very likely this increase began following the August 9th, 2014 shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. And the FBI assesses it is very likely incidents of alleged police abuse.
Why is she overemphasizing certain words in the sentence? That's really fucking ridiculous.
I want to read you more from this report, but I do want you to pay attention to some of the terminology that they're using here. And I tried to really emphasize it when I was speaking, but they say perceptions of police brutality, alleged police abuse.
You try to emphasize it with your words because you're a hack and you can't even stop editorializing when you're reading a quote. It's actually really hard to be that bad at journalism.
Apparently, according to the FBI, it's not that these people who are committing these acts of violence are mad about the racism. They're apparently being irrational in their reactions to the racism, according to the FBI.
No, you idiot. They're not acting irrational about the racism. There is no racism. That's what they're saying. And they cite Michael Brown as an example. Now, I know the Young Turks has done really bad reporting on the Michael Brown story, but you would think when the Justice Department released an 88-page document showing how most of the witnesses and all of the forensic evidence supported Darren Wilson's account of what happened, they would stop using Michael Brown as an example of racism, but they don't. So yes, if Michael Brown getting killed is what motivates you to be a Black identity extremist, then you're motivated by the alleged misconduct against Michael Brown because Darren Wilson was never convicted and all of the forensic evidence and most of the witnesses support Darren Wilson's account of offense, not the account reported by the liberal media.
Before you go on, Hannah, I just want to know for the record, there is no such thing as Black identity extremists.
No.
There is no such thing as Black identity extremists.
No.
You know, it's funny how matter-of-fact Cenk is. He just says there's no such thing as Black identity extremists. And even though the Young Turks is reporting this as a thing that Donald Trump is doing because he's racist, this has actually been Cenk's position on Black extremists for years. Take a look at this clip from when Cenk was on MSNBC.
There's been an explosive rise in the number of hate groups over the last year. But those are on the extreme right, having nothing to do with Muslim groups. The stunning report from the Southern Poverty Law Center puts the number of active U.S. hate groups at more than 1,000 for the first time ever. Congratulations, America. Topping the list, the Ku Klux Klan with 221 related groups. They're followed by neo-Nazi groups, 170 of them nationwide. And that doesn't make any sense. So why is this?
He was doing a story on hate groups that were growing under the Obama administration. So in order to do the story, somebody from the graphics department pulled up information from the Southern Poverty Law Center. However, something that Cenk didn't expect happened when he went to read the graphic live on air.
Topping the list, the Ku Klux Klan with 221 related groups. They're followed by neo-Nazi groups, 170 of them nationwide. And that doesn't make any sense. So why is this?
You see that even when it comes from a left-wing source like the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it's put together by his own graphics team, Cenk still rejected the idea of Black extremist groups existing. Of course, when you bring up the misclassification of certain right-wing groups as hate groups, Cenk dismisses that because in those instances, the Southern Poverty Law Center is gospel. But when they actually point out that there are black supremacist groups in the United States and they do potentially pose a threat, he don't want to have anything to do with it.
There is no such thing as black identity extremists.
No.
Well, there is now because it's in a piece of paper.
Well, I mean, basically what they're doing is they're trying to relabel, the BLM as something that it's not.
That was a start, wasn't it? My favorite part of that whole beginning thing was saying the FBI is trying to relabel Black Lives Matter as something it's not. There's a petition on the White House's website to recognize them as a terrorist organization, and not to mention all the damage they've done to cities and private business.
I mean, it's pretty obvious as you read throughout here that it's all about like Black Lives Matter movement, but they just sort of like rephrased it so that they're not as explicit with how racist they're being.
With how racist they're being. No, they're not being racist at all. What they're saying is that there's a certain ideology that, if taken to an extreme, has had consequences for police officers. The funny thing is that the FBI went out of their way to not name Black Lives Matter in this memo, because they're not really talking about Black Lives Matter. They're talking about people who might share some of their ideological principles, but want to act violently on them.
Now, they cite violence against police officers as a reason for this identification. They go into the FBI judges very likely BIE perceptions of police brutality against African Americans have become organizing drivers for the BIE movement since 2014. I think that's another sort of, they're very clearly alluding to the BLM movement, resulting in a spike of BIEs intentionally targeting law enforcement with violence. Now, they go into in great detail all of the violence against police officers, yet they don't do any sort of detail about violence against Black people.
Well, why would they? There's a shit ton of websites dedicated specifically to breaking down how many police killings there are, how many police on Black killings, white killings, male, female. There's websites that break down everything into the individual category. Right now, the cops are talking specifically about the cops that have been killed due to this movement. Not everything has to be about you or your movement. It's all right for things to kind of diverge and go off into more serious subjects.
Oh my god, this memo about black extremists killing police officers doesn't talk about officers hurting Black people. Why would this memo that's specifically about this thing not be about this other thing that fits my narrative? Must be racism. This is such a ridiculous and absurd point. In fact, it doesn't even really qualify as a fucking point. This is like if we were shooting a rocket up into space and the rocket exploded, and NASA did a report on that rocket exploding. Then you read the report and got mad because you wanted the report about the rocket that exploded to give you information about GM and their recall and how many accidents were caused by defective GM parts. I know for a fact that the FBI does have a report on perceived police brutality, and I guarantee you that in those reports about police brutality, it doesn't talk about the war in Afghanistan.
And the FBI has a pretty thorough record of being pretty racist.
Here we go, the thing that they do when they start pretending that linear time doesn't exist. The FBI at some point in the past was targeting minorities, so the FBI warning about this must just be racism, because time, who can understand that? It's like a straight line, but you know, sometimes the past is the present and the present's the past.
And the FBI has a pretty thorough record of being pretty racist. I mean, when you look at the counterintelligence programs that they used to carry out and still continue to carry out, they've always sort of like, they targeted the Black Panthers, they targeted Martin Luther King, they targeted people during the Civil Rights Movement.
Of course the FBI would target the Black Panthers. They're a dangerous separatist movement. They would walk around with heavy guns, like shotguns, like big shotguns, and just terrorize. They're still a thing, but they're not as dangerous now as when they were first started.
This is just a way of saying, I don't know, separate mass shooters, and in those cases, like in Dallas, Louisiana, they did hit cops, but they were not part of organizations. In fact, the one in Dallas that killed 5 officers was actively rejected from every Black group he tried to join.
I like how Cenk says that the Dallas shooter tried to join Black groups and was rejected by those Black groups. Therefore, his shooting of police officers didn't have anything to do with his ideology. that made him want to join those black groups. The Dallas Black Lives Matter organization saw this guy, saw that he was interested in violence, and didn't let him join their organization. So for me, the Dallas Black Lives Matter movement has no responsibility for the Dallas shooting. That being said, we can't ignore the fact that this guy wanted to join these groups. He was ideologically aligned with them. And that's what this report is about. People who are ideologically aligned with people who are against police brutality, except they think the solution is violence. That's why they are black identity extremists and not Black Lives Matter people. And the reason you can draw a connection between that guy and Gavin Long, the Louisiana shooter, is we know from Gavin Long's YouTube page, which he reacted to TYT videos about police brutality and was aligned with TYT on the issue of police brutality and decided to take that into the world and kill people. We know that there's an ideological connection between the two shooters, hence the term black identity extremists. And by the way, I'm not saying that TYT is responsible for Gavin Long's actions. The majority of people who come across TYT's racist anti-white propaganda just laugh at it. They can't be held responsible for every crazy person who agrees with them ideologically and gets inspired by them to do a certain crime. Unlike TYT, I actually believe that all people, including minorities, have agency. The only person responsible for the Louisiana shooting was Gavin Long.
And so that's why this is, if they were trying to track a movement that was dangerous to cops, of course you should do that. But in this case, you invented a category that doesn't exist for a movement that doesn't exist. And of course, the real problem is, one, you're wasting resources, and don't do that because you've actually done some pretty good work otherwise. And number two is you're now saying, winking and nodding to some FBI agents, if they have that proclivity, just target black groups, whether they had anything to do with the violence or not.
What? How are they whistling or doing anything to tell a FBI agent, oh, just attack them because they're black? You're breathing racism into something that has no need for it. There's nothing to do with like a specific race here. It's just, hey, this group is fucking dangerous. So pay attention to them. Make sure they don't do anything fucking dangerous. And you want to make it seem like some big fucking race thing. Like, don't worry, they're just black. You can go ahead and beat them. It's cool. What?
You're right. It's like sort of like a wink and a nod. Okay, we said that the alt-right and people who identify as like white supremacists and things like that are a significant domestic terrorist threat, but also we'll add this in to make sure that we're like covering our bases and not pissing off enough people. So it boggles my mind that the Bureau cannot look at those two, like that compares them, right? It boggles my mind that they can compare them, and it boggles my mind that they don't see that and are not targeting that more effectively.
Or is it possible that both sides are a threat? I know how much you hate that both sides argument, but it's there. Both sides commit violence. Both sides are disgusting. Neo-Nazis are shit. Black supremacists are shit. Fuck them both.
The only ideology, that I've seen is an ideology of equality, justice, and fairness.
Wow, way to add nothing to the conversation, Brett. They just want justice, fairness, and equality.
The danger just by having this term out there is you're going to funnel people who believe in equality, justice, and fairness.
Justice, equality, fairness.
It's going to get looser and more loosely affiliated with an act of violence into a potential for an act of violence, which, they seem to be pretty angry holding signs. Well, of course they're angry holding signs because they want equality, justice, and fairness, and they're not getting it.
Fairness, justice, and equality.
This gives the FBI an ability to classify them as such, and that's not fair.
And that's not fair. You can go back and check all of my videos. I've never once used the word cuck because I'm actually quite the sophisticated YouTuber. And I know that me just telling you this whole long spiel that isn't going anywhere, but it's about the word cuck, will make you forever associate Brett with that word. Even though I've never really called him that, and I've never actually said it before on this channel. Proud of myself.
If you did it to white people and you said, okay, because some neo-Nazi did some violence in Charlottesville, any Tea Party protest is potential extremists, that would be outrageous and it would be unjustified.
Essentially, that is what happened to the Tea Party. It got called racist and bigoted so many times that it just basically disappeared.
Wait and try and slip that false equivalency by me. The Tea Party movement had absolutely nothing to do with white supremacists or white nationalists. A more apt comparison would be that if a white nationalist did something violent and terroristic, would you associate that with alt-right ideas? And I would say yes, because they actually share a similar ideological strain. And I would actually say that's perfectly fair. Obviously, ideologues that are dedicated to a white ethno-state are potentially dangerous, especially if they choose violence as their means to achieve that state. So yes, if the FBI wants to treat white identitarian movements the same as black identitarian movements, I'm totally cool with that. You're the one who has a problem with it, and you're the one with the double standard. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. I want to give a special thanks to Pissed Off Popsicle TV for joining me for this collaboration. I couldn't get through this video and its idiocy without you. If you like this collaboration, then please check out his channel. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. Subscribe for more content. Support me on Patreon and PayPal. This has been Sean doing a video that will get demonetized 100% for sure, and I'm gonna have to replace that cat because of it. Till next time.